shafa'ati, that my intercession becomes a must for them. It will be granted for them. So, and any other dua that you like after that point, after the adhan is a good time to make dua. The question that was asked in that dua, اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آتي سيدنا محمد الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. This extra sentence at the end, it's not part of the riwayah of the Prophet sallallahu. I don't know the origin of it. Somebody can look it up. But is there anything wrong in saying it? No. It's إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. Oh Allah, you do not go back on your promise. That's what you're saying. Ya Allah, I'm asking this, I'm making this dua as you have asked me to make. In essence, this is what you're saying. And indeed, you don't go back on your promise. You promise that your shafa'ah would happen for me, and Ya Allah, you're not going to go back on your promise. You're not making a demand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's like a plea with Allah. It's like you're recognizing how valuable this dua is when you're saying that. And that's the essence of it, right? So, Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, I don't know the origin. Somebody can look it up. Perhaps it came from one of the, one of the Sahaba that added on that phrase, one of the Tabi'een. I'm not sure. Somebody could look it up. It's an addition. It's in the science of hadith. It's called al-idraj. Al-idraj. It became a part of the hadith, but it's not a part of the hadith. It's not a part of the original words of the Prophet ﷺ. It's an extra thing that's added. You guys know our Arab-speaking brothers and sisters. You know what a durj is? Bil-Masri, a durj, which is what?
For us, drawer.
A drawer. Like you added it in. It's an addition. You snuck it in there. That's kind of what al-idraj in the study of hadith. That's what it's called. Let's see. Anybody find anything? Yeah.
There's one thing that says Muhammad bin Auf al-Ta'i was alone in narrating, and this addition, like he added it in the narrating.
What's the name?
Muhammad bin Auf al-Ta'i.
Doesn't say who he is? No. Yeah. So yeah, somebody added it in, right? What generation he's from doesn't sound like Sahabi. Perhaps from the Tabi'een, I'm not sure. But it became kind of commonplace. And Allah A'lam, nothing wrong. You're not doing it. It's not part of the original hadith, and it's an addition. All right. Okay. Where are we? So during the iqamah, there's nothing that I am familiar with that comes specifically from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that is established, that talks about the virtue of repeating repeating the iqamah. I'm not familiar with anything of that sort. Here, Shaykh Sayyid Sabiq, he says that it is preferred that one who hears the iqamah repeat the words, except when qad qamat as-salah is said, he should say, Allah establishes it and makes it everlasting, which is what? I'm not familiar even myself. I don't know. I don't even find it in the original text, so. Yeah, I'm not sure what the but again, from the authentic sunnah, there's nothing that comes that says this is what's to be said after as the iqamah is being called. Okay, conditions to be met by the caller to prayer. In other words, like the one that's making the adhan and the iqamah, what's his qualifications? What are his conditions? One should make the adhan for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake, not for wages. In some places it's actually a thing. You're the one who, the mu'addin, and you're paid by the state or whatever, that sort of thing. And perhaps, I don't know what the later day ulama, if they gave some allowance for that and that's why it became a practice. But you have hadith that talk about, that say that should not be done. Let's see. So, I mean, you would also infer from that you do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not doing it to show off to, oh, look, mashallah, he says that or something like that, right? Just like in any act in our deed, should not be done for showing off. One should be clean, one should have tahara, that they should be upon wudu, and they definitely should not be junub, and they should be tahir, meaning they should have wudu. But the Imam the Shafi'iyya, in the Shafi'i school, they gave a little bit more leniency, making the adhan while one is not in a state of cleanliness is permissible, although disliked. Let's see, one should be standing and facing the Qibla. Right? Adhan should be done while one is standing and facing the Qibla. And one small component of it is that when you say Hayya ala salah, you turn to the right. When you say Hayya ala al-falah, you turn to the left. That was the practice of Sayyiduna Bilal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Another practice, sunnah of the making the adhan is that one should put their index fingers in their ears like this. Right? That was the practice of Sayyidina Bilal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu as well. One should say the adhan out loud, even if you're by yourself. Even if you are by yourself. And in the hadith that's related by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, I see, and he's talking to someone else, Abdullah ibn Abdul Rahman, he says, I see that you love the sheep and the desert. If you are with your sheep or in the desert, then raise your voice while making the call to prayer, for any jinn, human, or anything within hearing distance of your voice will be a witness for you on the day of resurrection. I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that. So subhanallah, other aspects of creation will witness for you that act on Yawm al-Qiyamah. One should say the adhan in a slower fashion than the iqamah, as is the practice everywhere. There should be more pauses there in the adhan. The iqamah is done in a more hurried fashion, and one should not speak during the iqamah. It's disliked that one should do that, but it's not forbidden. You're getting ready for salah, you're putting yourself in that mindset state, and one should be getting ready for that, not being busy with other things. Okay. Let's see. I don't want to take too much more time on the adhan, but there's a couple more sections. I'll go through them very quickly. the adhan is done, of course, when the time for the salah comes in, not before the time, right? And there's some other small details there, but not too important to us. When the masjid establishes the adhan, and you're talking about in Muslim lands or in places where you're making the adhan out loud so that people in the neighborhood can hear, there should be enough time for people to get ready to make the iqamah. Right, like when we did it right now, we made the adhan and the iqamah one after the other. That's acceptable because you're making the adhan is not serving the full function of what it's supposed to serve. It's calling others from around to the salah. Right? So there's no problem in making them joint in that sense, because the time for the iqamah is supposed to be 6 o'clock. We made that. You follow what I'm saying? Okay. Whoever makes the adhan may make the iqamah. Generally speaking, it's the practice of the one who makes the adhan that they make the iqamah. And if somebody else is going to make the iqamah, it should be because the mu'adhin is not there, or they get the permission from the mu'adhin to make the iqamah. Okay? But other than that, it's the right, so to speak, of the mu'adhin to make the iqamah. When one should stand for prayer, this is meaning when the iqamah goes, if people are sitting down, is there a precise time when you stand for the prayer? There's no specific guidance from the Sunnah. It's mentioned here that Sayyidina Anas, radiallahu anhu, he would stand when the mu'adhin would say, قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, and then he would stand. And you see some people practice that, and wallahu a'lam, good practice, but it's not a special virtue or anything like that. Let's see. Yes, leaving the masjid after the adhan and before the prayer. Once you hear the adhan, you're bound to the masjid. What's the point of the adhan? The adhan is the call to prayer. The call to prayer was made and you leave. You are doing against what you're called to. When the mu'adhin says, Hayya ala salah, come to salah. If you're going elsewhere, then you're doing other than what is being called to. Now, that wouldn't apply to a woman that's, for example, on her menstrual cycle and she's leaving, because she's leaving and she's not praying, no problem. And generally speaking, if you hear that, then you are bound to the masjid. It is disliked to leave, makruh. But I would say it's a strong level of karaha, of dislike, right? It's not a small thing. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, as related by Imam Ahmad in this hadith, if one of you is in the masjid and the call is made, he should not leave the masjid until he goes. Okay? In another instance, a man, he left after the adhan was made, and the Prophet ﷺ said, that Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, who said that after this man left, that man has disobeyed Abu Qasim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That man has disobeyed the Prophet. Okay. Can you make the adhan and the iqamah if you missed salah? For example, you woke up late for Fajr, you woke up at 9 o'clock, you missed Fajr. Can you make the adhan and iqamah? Yes. The adhan is, is of less necessity even in that circumstance, but you can. But the iqamah can be made, but you can pray straight into it as well. Okay? The adhan and iqamah for women. Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he said that there is no adhan or iqamah for women, and that is the majority opinion. Imam al-Shafi'i, he said that it is permissible for women to make the adhan and the iqamah, not for everyone, for a group of women, right? For a group of women, and that is based on the fact that Sayyidah Aisha would make the adhan and the iqamah. So there is some evidence for that. So either way, but if women go straight into prayer, it is absolutely acceptable. The adhan and the iqamah is in the majority opinion, is not a practice that they need to engage before they establish prayer. Right? Men praying by yourself, ideally you say at least making the iqamah before you go into prayer. Right? But if you don't, also acceptable. Okay. What else? Entering the masjid after the iqamah is finished. Let's say you come to the masjid and the salah is already finished. Do you make the iqamah or do you make the adhan? Well, the adhan is already made. Here it's saying that it's acceptable, but Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, there's no need. He says it may even confuse people because the adhan is already made, now you're making the adhan again. And it's not the practice in most of the Muslim world, so you wouldn't do that. But you can make the iqamah, no problem. In the masjid with, for yourself or for a group of people that come after the main jama'ah. Okay. Let's see. There's one section there that says extraneous additions. This is a section about, there's a lot of practices that take place in the Muslim world about what Muslims do following the adhan. People do some different acts. I don't know if any of you have ever seen these things. People will take their hands and do something, and they do some weird kissing thing. I don't know if anybody ever seen that. No? Yeah, you seen that? Some of the Sufis, they will do some of these things in some parts of the world. I've seen some of the, but none of that is from the Sunnah, right? None of that is from the Sunnah. Where do you see that on?
In India.
In India, yeah. What do they do?
They kiss their fingers and kiss their eyes.
Yeah, some stuff like. So there's none of that is from the Sunnah. None of that is from the Sunnah. Doing those extraneous acts related to. There will be certain things that in some Sufi groups will do in terms of doing salawat on the Prophet ﷺ after the adhan or something like that in some sort of particular way. There's none of that is from the Sunnah. There's a debate about can you say in the adhan أشهد أن سيدنا محمدا رسول الله in the adding Sayyidina, and that's not from the Sunnah either. Most of the ulama, they reject that. Some in the Shafi'i school, they allow that because it's giving respect to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if you're following the pure Sunnah, that's not there. You say Sayyidina Muhammad in other circumstances. You don't call him by his name, just his name, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina Muhammad, Rasulullah, Nabiullah, Nabiyuna Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any of those ways, but you don't say Muhammad by itself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in the adhan, yes, because that's the sunnah. But in regular speech and addressing, no. Okay, so that is the section on the adhan and everything related to it. Any questions? Yes?
What's the ruling on speaking during that?
Can you speak up?
What's the ruling on speaking during that?
Speaking during the disliked, but not haram. The reason it's disliked because there's something that is more worthy to be doing in that moment, which is to be repeating after the adhan, right? So what's the definition of makruh? Huh? I'm sorry? What's the definition, not the translation?
No sin, but rewarded for being
You're not sinful for doing it if you talk during the adhan, but you're rewarded for not talking. Right? All right. Any other questions? Okay. So, like we're trying to be better and better. Oftentimes you go to the masjid, oftentimes, and I'll call it for what it is, the adhan is being called out, and let's say there's a Friday night program at the masjid. Women will continue talking, more so than men, right? I'll call it for what it is, right? You don't have to be like everyone else, right? You are better informed now, right, of what is a more worthy practice, and so that's what you should strive to practice. Okay. Let's see. Let's go into this next section. I didn't think we'd get this far, but alhamdulillah we did. So prerequisites of the salah. Let's try to. Yeah, let's see if we can get through this section, inshallah ta'ala, so we have a clean break. So, shurut salah, the prerequisites of salah, things that precede the prayer, and they are things that are a must for the musalli, the one who is praying, to be, able to pray. Okay, and if these requirements are not fulfilled, if these prerequisites are not instituted, then their salah is batila, is not valid. So they're very important. So number one, that the time for prayer has to have begun. What extent do you have to know that the time for prayer has begun? You have to have what's called ghalabatul one, at the least. Either certainty for sure. You literally see the sun go below the horizon. That's yaqeen, yaqeen. You're seeing it with your eyes. Or at the very least, ghalabatul one, that most probably the time is in, right? For whatever circumstance. If you're out somewhere, based on whatever evidence is, that most probably the time is in. Okay? That's number one. You cannot guess and say, yeah, I think the time is in, and you're basing it on nothing. And then you pray, and then you find out later the time for prayer didn't come in, then your prayer is not valid. If you were doing it based on nothing, if you're doing it based on something, then inshallah your prayer is valid. Sound. Okay? Let's see. That one should be in a state of tahara, meaning no major or minor impurities, no najasa that should be on their person, and this is the next section. No najasa should be on their person, meaning on their body, on their clothes, or in the place of prayer. Right? We talked about this a little bit before. These are things that we've mentioned before. Okay. And we went into some detail about some of these matters, right? So I don't think we need to go into them again. Any questions about this? So number one should be in a state of tahara, which is what type of hadath or khabath. Saying they should be in a state of tahara, they should be what? Free of, what's that called? Hadath. Remember? Hadath is the metaphorical, is not a physical form of impurity. You don't have wudu. You don't have ghusl if you need ghusl. There should be no hadath, and there should be no khabath. What is khabath? It's the physical impurity, right? As you mentioned, on your body, on your clothes, in your place of prayer. Okay? Those are additional prerequisites, shurut as-salah, conditions for the salah to be valid. And then one should have their awrah covered. What is the awrah, and what is the evidence for this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. That you should have, you should be O children of Adam, take your adornment, meaning by wearing proper clothing for every mosque. Here, masjid means salah, for every salah. So, and here, zina means the covering of your awrah. Okay? So, what is the awrah? And most of you are familiar. The awrah for women is that all parts of the body should be covered except for hands and face. In the Hanafi school, if the feet are uncovered too, it's also acceptable. Your awrah is covered. So there is a little bit more allowance in the Hanafi school. I've heard stories from sisters where sometimes they'll leave their feet uncovered and they'll go in certain places and the women there will tell them, you can't pray like that, you have to cover your feet. Why is that? Is there a difference of opinion there? And those women are going based on what they know, like cover your feet. So, this is a general good rule to know. I want you to, for those of you who at least speak Arabic, you can remember this phrase, it's a helpful phrase. They say, خروج من الخلاف مستحب. الخروج من الخلاف مستحب. What does that mean? Anybody? Anybody? That means to take yourself out of a position where there's a difference of opinion is preferred. In other words, you go into a masjid where many of the women, most of the community is from Sham, Shafi'i, for example, from Syria, Jordan, Palestine, whatever, and most of the women there, they cover their feet because that's their understanding, that's their practice, that's their madhab, that's how they're raised, that's what they're taught. And then you go in there and you don't go in there like bullheaded and say, well, I'm gonna pray with my feet uncovered no matter what. It's just like, it's not wrong. I'm Hanafi, they should understand that. But if all of those women, that's what they see and they feel uncomfortable and it leads to discomfort, al-khuruj min al-khilafi mustahab. You take yourself out of a position of being holding on to a different opinion. That's preferred. Right? In other words, like in places where there are differences of opinion, we don't want to exploit that. We don't want to, make it a thing. You want to minimize that. It doesn't need to be a point of fitna or division or bringing up potential argumentation. No, you try to minimize that. That's the point. You understand it's a very beneficial sort of rule. There's another rule that also says, sorry, these markers are whack, that says, لا إنكار في المختلف فيه. These are very valuable sort of principles. إنكار لا إنكار في المختلف فيه. which is what? That, anybody understand that?
You can't reject an opinion when there are varying opinions.
You shouldn't rebuke someone else if it's a different upon issue. So for those same, let's take that same example. Those same Shafi'i women, like they shouldn't go around, yeah, that's your opinion, your madhab, but you shouldn't go around and telling other Hanafi women, call them, you know, who don't wear socks, like, hey, you guys gotta wear socks. Because there's a different upon opinion. Now, if you don't know, you don't know, right? But once you know that there's difference of opinion, you don't go around rebuking people for that. Hey, you guys can't pray like that. No. So you see both sides of the coin, right? One is you should be cognizant of the difference of opinion and try not to stand out, right? And make it a thing. But on the flip side, don't go around condemning people for something that is different upon. Make sense? You understand that, like the beauty of it, like the beauty of our deen. You know, like there's allowance, there's space, there's a continuum sometimes of opinions, and so we want to be conscious. Is that clear? Anybody want to? Huh? Fee. Yeah. So الخروج من الخلاف مستحب لا إنكار في المختلف فيه. Okay? Just general nice principles to kind of know. Okay. Not related to these particular issues, but I just thought it sensible to bring them up here. Okay. So, covering the awrah. What is the awrah? We talked about what that is for women. For men, what is the awrah?
Belly button to knees.
From the navel to the knee, right? From the belly button to the knee. There's a difference exactly as to where that is, and there's some particulars that in the different madhahib they say, well, what part of the knee? What does that mean? So, yes, when I didn't look it up before I came, if I'm not mistaken, in the Hanafi madhab is like right below the belly button to the knee being covered. So like you can wear, the belly button can actually be exposed and you're still covering your awrah, and then below the knee. Other opinions above the belly button, and then the variance of below the knee, at the knee, above the knee, there's a little bit of a variance there. So again, these rules come into play. You go to a masjid and a bunch of uncles there, like don't go around with your shorts that are just like riding above the knee. You're gonna get scolded, right? So be conscious of what you do, even though there may be some space for that, allowance for that. So you want to be conscious, and as far as the knees are concerned, yes, ideally you're covering your knee all the way, and ideally you're not going around without a shirt and saying, covering my awrah, right? So that would be culturally very inappropriate, and you will get for sure scolded at the masjid. Okay. What else? That's the awrah, right? And this is not the place to go into deep particulars about everything related to the awrah. That's its own discussion if we were to talk about that subject altogether, but just generally as it relates to our subject, the subject of the conditions or the prerequisites of salah. Okay. Somebody had their hand up? All right. Any questions about awrah? Okay. Uncovering the head during the prayer. If you grew up in a heavy-duty Hanafi community, like this is a thing where, I don't, perhaps you guys didn't experience it as much, but like if you go to some places, like you go to a masjid and while you're praying, if you're not wearing a topi, a kufi, they'll put it on you while you're praying, And here you go, make your prayer valid. It is not a prerequisite for salah. And even in the Hanafi madhab, it is not a prerequisite for salah. There's no evidence of that. Now, it's seen as a virtuous thing, a sign of dignity, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wore imamah, he wore a head. He had a head covering, and it would be wrapped, and that was his practice. And from that we inherit that practice, but it's not a prerequisite for the salah. There's no evidence for that. But if you do it, good. Especially if it's in a situation where there's all uncles, Bangladeshi, Indian, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, not Sri Lankan, but Bangladeshi, Indian, Pakistani uncles, like have your topi on when you pray, right? Older generation uncles. You guys who've been in the country 20, 30 years, you're fine. Right? But it's same concept. الخروج من الخلاف مستحب. Don't make it an issue when it doesn't need to be. Alright. Facing the Qibla, of course, is also a prerequisite for the Salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطَرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. Facing the direction of al-Masjid al-Haram. So that is, of course, everybody knows, even non-Muslims know. Muslims, when they pray, they face Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ, of course, the first Qibla was to Jerusalem, but then, of course, the Qibla changed to Mecca, the Kaaba in particular. And let's say somebody doesn't know which direction the Qibla is in. What do? What is the least that's required of you? You do what's called taharri. Taharri means that you seek to find which direction the Qibla is by whatever means you have. You have a phone, well, you have an app. You can't just say, oh, I'm standing here and I'll just pray, whatever. If you don't have a phone, you don't have your app, you have the sun. You should have some sense of direction. I'm going to show you a very super easy way of figuring out the Qibla where we live in Los Angeles. What's the degrees that we face towards, what's the direction towards Mecca from here? Huh?
24-ish.
24-ish what? Was it? Huh?
Like
Past north. 24, 28, right? North, northeast, right? 90 degrees is going to be what? Due east, right? North is 0, east is 90, right? 45 would be northeast, but we're about 26, 28, which is north to northeast. So how do you figure that out? Very rudimentary. The sun sets in the what? Huh? In the west. Also, memorize that statement. The sun sets in the west, right? The sun sets in the west. The west from here is there, right? The east is where? Here. North is there. So northeast is there, right? I'm just doing this rudimentary, right? Like, if we're saying the west is here, east is there, north is here, northeast, look, it almost not, right? This is you can do that anywhere. So, don't be like lost without this, right? the environment around us, if we don't have any connection, we don't have any sense, we don't have any sensibility, like you've lost a part of your soul of who you are. Like you're not connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, and you're standing and you don't even know where you are. It's more difficult for your generation than it was for mine. We didn't have Google Maps and we didn't have all these things. You have to know directions. You have to go north on the 405, go south on the 405, go west on the 101, go east on. We knew those things. You guys just put the address in and you can go to the same place 20 times by Google Maps, but you can't get there by yourself. Right? So try to be more cognizant of the environment. It's part of being a more connected Muslim to the world that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed you in, right? And so I see an important piece of us is lost if we're not connected to the world. So anyways, just some general life advice. So anyways, we face the Qibla. If you don't know where the Qibla is, you have to make a reason